This podcast has been produced in partnership between Diverse Learners and the Workforce Disability Equality Standard team to explore the lived experiences of disabled staff working in the NHS. So welcome everybody to A Conversation With, the podcast that we're doing in partnership with ourselves, Diverse Learners, and WDES, which is the Workforce Disability Equality Standard. And we're having another contribution, and actually they've come to us via the WDES survey, and there was a tick box on there saying if you want to get more involved in raising awareness or helping us collect data, then please do. So that's why we're talking to who we are today. So without a further ado, we'll go on with a conversation with, and it's a conversation with Marce today. And I'm going to ask you, number one, could you tell us who you are, what your job in the NHS is, and how you would describe your disability, Marce?
Okay, well, my name's Marce Quinn, and I'm the lead of the Disabled Staff Network at Brighton and Sussex University Hospitals Trust. My real job is that of a medical secretary, and I have to fit in being the lead of the network around that. My disability, or special power, as I sometimes call it, is that I have osteoarthritis throughout my skeleton. I've got bilateral total hip replacements, and those came about through the degeneration to the point where I could barely walk. I actually had a double bilateral hip replacements, as the first ones I had developed metal poisoning, and so they needed to be replaced. I consider myself 10% bionic now. When I'm describing my disability, I say that my brain works fine most of the time at least, but my skeleton's a mess.
Right. Excellent. So we've been talking a bit through some of the podcasts about how people describe their own disability and maybe label their own disability. So I'm now calling you the bionic woman.
You may. I've also got a titanium plate in my ankle where when I was pregnant with my middle daughter, all I did was turn my ankle in the snow. So that's 29 years ago now, but I still remember it. It was on Valentine's Day Eve. And I popped my tendons in my right ankle, dislocated my foot and broke my tibia. So I have a metal plate in my ankle. So that part of me, my leg is probably 5% bionic. So I'm going for total metal skeleton. That's my plan.
Excellent. I feel there's like a Marvel link then, but I don't know the characters well enough to know which one that one is. So is that how they found out that you had osteoarthritis then, through that accident?
No, actually, because until then I hadn't had a problem at all. In fact, up until, I mention it later actually, but up until early 2000s, I was still visiting the gym 3 times a week. I played squash every weekend. And in between those days, I swam because I'd always had a weight issue. And the only way I could maintain a good, for me, a good healthy weight was to basically bombard my body by upping my metabolism to beyond what most people. And they say it's genetic osteoarthritis, but it also does have, unfortunately, a high impact sport is a real killer to bring on osteoarthritis. And they think that that might have just finished me off.
Right. Thanks for sharing that, because I think, we like to challenge some assumptions and some myths in these podcasts. And I think, that's a myth that
disabled people are lazy, that one.
Yeah, or disabled people don't do sports and can't be sports people. Absolutely. I think the Paralympics, in 2012 addressed some of those, and there's a great set of podcasts with the swimmer who has dwarfism, and I can't remember her name. I did have it about 2 seconds ago, but it just flew out of my head. I want to say Kizzy or something like that. They won loads of gold medals and then became real voice for Yes We Can, that campaign through Paralympics 2012. And I sometimes use that in my training. These assumptions, and what's nice about those videos is that
Ellie Simmons is her name.
That's it. Thank you, darling.
Thank God for Google.
Yeah, Google is my brain. And so it interspersed those videos with people doing everyday tasks, like a mum who had no arms cuddling a baby, for example, with somebody brushing their teeth using their foot, for example. So there were some great examples. So check that out, people, if you're looking for some nice awareness raising tools. I'm going to ask you a sub question now, just because you said almost like my day job and my proper job. So Are you seconded to the disability? Do you do it in your own time? Do they give you time off to do that? Which kind of sort of fits in with what are your experiences of working in the NHS?
Well, that's what they say, an interesting question. And to unpick it a little bit, what actually happened is the trust I worked for prior to the one I work for now actually had a disabled staff network, and I joined it and enjoyed the support and all the lovely bits that happened because of it, that I got to sit in the audience and watch all these wonderful speakers. So when I joined the trust I'm with, which is huge, by the way, and it's going to be bigger because they're doing a merger.
This is the Brighton and
Sussex University Hospitals, and yeah, we're in the middle of a merger with Western Sussex, which will pretty much double our workforce. When I joined it, I thought, okay, I'll just join their network, that'd be great. And I spoke to the quality lead of our service and said, oh, can I join the disabled staff network, please? She went, oh, we don't have one. She said, we sort of had one a few years ago, but it kind of never got off the ground, it fizzled out. And I just, oh, crikey, my brain started fizzing then, half with rage, to be honest. And I said, well, then I'll just, flippantly, I said, all right, then I might as well just start one. And she said, well, you might as well. And that's what happened. It was a bit like Field of Dreams. I compared myself to Kevin Costner. I built it and they came. I built it and nobody came. That's the truth of it. It would be me sitting in a room, and if I was lucky, there was another person or another two people. Sometimes I pushed 4 people. That was pre-COVID. COVID came and was my saviour because of Microsoft Teams. And now I never have less than 5. And on rare occasions when I really do kick some people into action, I've had as many as 20.
So with your bionic leg?
With my bionic leg and any other part of me, I will literally cajole them and beg them and say, look, the reason I need you here today is because we have this particular speaker who's agreed to come along. Don't make me look like a knobby no-mates and not turn up. So a top tip for other disability and quality, diversity and inclusion people is, think about doing things differently, maybe through teams or a combination of teams and being in the place and guest speakers. I think we've actually mentioned if you build it, they will come in another podcast. Actually, I know it's a phrase I use an awful lot in diverse learners because I've been doing this kind of support over a video platform, previously Skype, now Zoom, now MS Teams, for the last 10 years. And it resolved from the same idea. Why aren't all of our nurses at university getting support because they're working on placement and we open at 10 and close at 4? And so I did, well, if they build it, they will come. And they absolutely did. And then so much so that I then went and set up diverse learners on my own. One of the other things I think is important to say is that in the WDES 10-point checklist, having a disability staff network is actually a big tick and a point, and a really good action point for people who have to now publish in the public domain. Well, a cynical person would say that's why I got so much support early doors. I'm not going to comment on that. I have to say I have had a lot of support. Now, you were asking, do I get time off? Do I get this? I learned a very good phrase, which is better to ask for forgiveness and permission.
I've used that phrase today with somebody else with the podcast.
That's kind of what I do. And I have, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, but I also have emails come through on my phone. So I have been known to answer people's queries at the weekend because people's shifts are all different, aren't they? I'm not a clinician, so my days are pretty much 9 to 5, thank goodness. But, clinicians aren't, and they could have an issue that erupts on a Saturday night. And in fact, our membership, so this is what happened. Let me just backtrack a little bit. We adopted Workplace. I don't know if you know about Workplace. It's basically a little nickname is Facebook for a closed version of Facebook.
Yes.
So we adopted it early doors, which was way before COVID. We were ahead of the game, which meant was really good because you could set up your own group. So I set up the Disabled Staff Network as a group, made sure I put lots of posts up. So whenever anyone sort of commented on a post, I'd quickly go, would you like to join the DSN? Or more, or worse than that, I kind of joined them to the DSN email outs. And if they ever, like something, I check their name. I go, would you like to join the DSN? So now I've actually got 83 members. So we went from me, just me, to 83 in about a year and a half,
Wow.
2 years, I suppose.
From being proactive, committed, open, flexible.
Yes. And when we had, for example, Disability History Month last month, going backwards, a little bit, just recently and very recently, one of the members who's kind of been there from the start but just wasn't able to come along to a lot of the meetings when they were in person, I now actually, she's my colleague, and she said to me recently, I'm always ended up taking the notes, can you give me a title please? And I said, okay, you're the secretary now, which has meant obviously when people contact me, and they still are, by the way, I get contacted by our enrolment team, who are very kind. If anyone says to them at enrolment, oh, I'm very interested in the DSN, can you send me some information? They send me a little list, and I send out, well, she does now, thank goodness. She sends them out a little bit of blurb about us, a little presentation that I did early doors about it, that I put slides on and thought I was being ever so clever, learning about PowerPoint because I've never used it. Now I read it, I think, oh dear, you amateur. But anyway.
Development.
Exactly. So she sends out a welcome and a hello, and then I add them. That's how it should work. I add them to the mailing list. And then on a Thursday, if we've got a fair wind, I send out a sort of, here's some interesting things I found out this week, and I send out little links to this that are too long to go through when we have our very short meeting, which at the moment we're having fortnightly, but quite a lot of that is filled with people going, I don't know what to do about this. So I'm kind of fixing that. So yeah, every Thursday I use that kind of as like a little bit of PR really. And hopefully people will come back and go, oh, I didn't know about that, tell me more. And I get people to share that around as well. So that's how we've kind of grown it. We've tried to grow it, what's the word?
Not incrementally, word of mouth?
Yes. Oh my gosh, it's not genetically, what's the word? But just by itself, kind of without having to push it. I hope that people would just hear it about it when they need it and then get involved in it. And that's kind of how it has worked, really. Not many people get involved in it. That's my only worry. Not many people get involved with it who don't necessarily need it. And because I need allies, and that's the bit I want to work on harder, really.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that. So the WDES, so the Workforce Disability Equality Standard, are aware that their framework is a bit of a push factor. And being able to now have that in the public domain where people do have to say what they scored and what action points they're going to take is actually, not necessarily their favoured way of moving forward. But as you say, sometimes there needs to be a proactive approach or an encouragement approach for people to be compliant, if you want to use that word. Also, again, WDES and ourselves at Diverse Learners absolutely agree about the people coming forward through COVID. And there's a number of reasons for that. People have been furloughed, or they're having to now declare, I prefer the word declare their disability rather than disclose their disability, to HR, occupational health, because they can't come in, or the anxiety levels and the mental health issues and the PPE have all presented barriers to them continuing to do their job, whereas before they had workarounds. So we're definitely seeing that as well, Marce.
Well, I am lucky because the Trust board, if you like, are very supportive, and so are the equality team, and we work in partnership with each other. I couldn't do what I do without their support. I met with our chief executive on a one-to-one the other week, and she was really supportive. And one of the things I was saying is about trying to encourage our staff group to tick the box on ESR. ESR
being, for those who are
the electronic staff record. It's to basically acknowledge that they've got it. And the reason I did a little film actually recently and put it up on Workplace, the reason why I'm all in favour of it is because if people don't know, it's that don't know. If you don't know that you don't know.
Yes.
It's called something bias, ignorant bias or something.
Unconscious bias.
Unconscious bias, thank you. If you don't know that you don't know to do it, then, I'm going to blinking well remind you that you can. And if you need reasonable adjustments in your workplace, Your employers might not even know, especially if you've got hidden disabilities, they might not know that you want them. Even if you don't pipe up, you can't expect people to be mind readers. All you can do is be in the position that if they do know and they don't keep to them, that's when you basically pull out the Equality Act 2010, which is my friend, and that's the one that I educate people on quite a lot. I've become, you know, a little bit of a sword waver of the Equality Act 2010.
Well,
And the reasonable adjustments.
Yeah, so case law is coming through now as well. So that will add to you can have a bit of an arsenal of weaponry going on there. I think you've answered question 3, actually. Have you formally told people at work you have a disability?
Yeah.
And you encourage others to do so too? So
it says, have you formally told? Well, I don't have a problem with letting people know I've got a disability. It's taken a long time for me to get my head around the fact that I'm disabled. As I mentioned earlier, prior to the early 2000s, I was a gym bunny. And now I do understand that my disability is for life, because not only do I have osteoarthritis, I've also had a few DVTs and PEs, which now mean I've got to take warfarin lifelong. Yeah. And that brings its own challenges. I have to be careful not to sort of injure myself. And there's limitations on what I can eat and drink. Yeah. So DVT being deep vein thrombosis. Deep vein thrombosis and PE, pulmonary embolism. Pulmonary embolisms, yeah. So I've had a couple of each of them. After operation, 2 of them were and 1 wasn't. It's really important for me that I don't let my disability define me. And as often I'm dealing with people who can't see me, they interact with me without judging me around my physical disability. And luckily, my brain works fine most of the time, so I'm grateful for that. I do obviously have trouble remembering names. Everyone that knows me thinks it's hilarious because I can never remember anyone's name. And in fact, Vicky, who's become the secretary of the DSN, has now become my memory jogger for names, and she knows when I'm struggling, she'll pop up with the name, thank goodness, because I don't know why it is. I just have trouble remembering people's names. I could remember somebody I've seen once in 10 years and then I see them again, but their name, terrible. Well, we all have our strengths. And it sounds like you being a very dynamic person, being a leader, being compassionate, being inventive and flexible, and all the different ways you've tried to reach out to people. I mean, I relate a lot to that. There's a lot of entrepreneurial skills in there as well, Marce, in terms of, you're almost setting up your own little business there with it being, the Disabled Staff Network. It's all those skills that you need to do that, the marketing, the encouragement, and the way you record all the information. We offer out of hours support, so we are 9 o'clock in the morning until 10 o'clock at night, 7 days a week, and diverse learners have always been that because of the result of the research project. And that's why we have so many nurses and doctors and OTs who use our support through access to work, who have a reasonable adjustment, like you were saying about declaring and ticking the box, and they have a reasonable adjustment. And so many people don't realise that the access to work scheme is there to support both the employee and the employer, remove some of those barriers and enable people to fulfill their potential. So I would go on to access to work. Yes, so I'm going to go on to, I'm going to officially ask you question 4 so people know where we're going. So what has been your experiences of how initiatives like access to work can help put reasonable adjustments in place to ensure you are not disadvantaged at work? Well, unfortunately, that's a difficult question for me to answer, as access to work couldn't help me, as the equipment I needed cost under £1,000, which is their threshold. Yes. So it meant it was necessary for me to work with my Trusts occupational health department and my manager, but they've been really supportive. The only criticism I would make is that it's clunky. And if you're not proactive, and you do kind of need to be proactive, you can get sort of a little bit missing in the system. Stuck in the system. I would encourage people, first of all, access to work. I have asked them to come along to one of our DSN meetings to chat to people about access to work. But of course, none of them are working on site at the moment, and no one wants to put their head above the parapet and say, okay, I'll do it. And I can appreciate that. Who wants us in their living room, which is pretty much where we would probably go. Yeah, I don't mind either, which is pretty much where we would go if they invited us. They're on my long finger, as they say in Ireland. They're on my long finger to invite them again when life is more sensible and get them to chat about what access to work does, because I kind of know, but I want them to share with their official hat on. But in my case, unfortunately, it just meant that things just took a little bit longer. I do also know one of my colleagues who has a visual impairment did need visual impairment equipment, and it was above £1,000.
Mm-hmm.
She also struggled, unfortunately, with getting access to work to get on with it. Just the system is clunky, that's all.
Well, that's interesting, because I also get access to work as well, and I'm just going to put a few little caveats in there as well. So when you're talking about the £1,000, for people who don't know about access to work, that is if you have an employer who has more than 249 employees, which the NHS would be, any part of the NHS would be that, they have to make a contribution of the first £1,000, and then 20% of anything up to £10,000. But anything from £10,000 to just over £60,000, they may no contribution to. So if there's human support, for example, that is needed, which can be more costly, it's all at nil cost, so it can all be reclaimed. And I think a lot of people worry when they see the amounts of money on access to work, like, oh my gosh, that's such a drain. But people need to be aware that actually there's a lot of the monies are reclaimable if it's human, all of the monies are reclaimable if it's human support, and it's heavily subsidised after that first £1,000. So when you talk about 20%, you could say that you could get £10,000 worth of equipment for just under £3,000, so it's heavily discounted as a contribution, or up to £60,000 worth of support, about £3,000 as well. And with the clunkiness, a lot of people, in the experience that I've supported a lot of people through this, is that there's a real disconnect between applying for access to work, having the assessment and having the report. That tends to go through quite straightforward and actually quite quickly. And then when access to work make the list saying, right, we think you should have this, this and this, and this is the contribution, once it comes back into the system of the NHS, this is where things, if you're not proactive, can get a bit lost and it can become clunky. And I've seen delays, enormous delays, of getting support. And so I really think there is a training need there for financial departments or purchasing to understand what this form is for, how to reclaim the monies. So I've worked with people in the NHS and they haven't reclaimed the monies in time because there is a time limit. Normally it's 6 months you have to reclaim the monies by. At the moment, due to COVID, it's 9 months. It's meant to be reviewed every 12 months as well, or if you get a new post or a new role or a new condition. But there is not that much information out there, and often people are asked for their line managers, so they put their line manager name in, and that might be the first time the line manager has ever come across access to work. So I do think, you know, I have been working with a couple of trusts to train some people up to be the access to work advisors within the trust as a paid post, rather than like yourself ending up as that as another role, so that actually that can be a much smoother process. And somebody is more than one person, because we know people get poorly or people move and they take all that really great education and knowledge with them straight out the trust to somebody else, and then, you know, it fizzles out. So there's a lot of work to do around access to work, absolutely, in terms of what happens once you get the report. How do we then get a nice smooth transition of all the equipment and the human resources and the software into the workplace, and the money is reclaimed, or what sort of barriers are in the way there? So I just wanted to just say that because of the £1,000 kind of comment.
I'm glad you clarified it, because obviously you've got more experience than I have. I just know that that's the first thing that they say is it going to cost over £1,000? If it is, then we can't help you. You need to talk to the trust.
Yeah, absolutely. And the employer is expected to make a contribution. So the last question is, and I kind of think we've talked about it a little bit, if you want to clarify or add anything in, is based on your experiences and insight, what advice would you offer to people who have disabilities and managers in the NHS for greater inclusiveness and removing barriers in the workplace?
That's a mouthful, isn't it? But
it is.
I would like greater training available around the induction process for staff who've got disabilities. I'd like awareness courses that managers and staff without disabilities could undertake. I had a plan for a conference to take place within our trust, which have been all around disabilities of all kinds, as there does seem to be a gap in our staff's knowledge around the subject of disability. and I planned for breakout rooms where staff could wear goggles that provide them with a level of sight that someone with visual difficulties on an everyday basis had to cope with. And I was hoping there could be a workshop around hidden disabilities to enable staff to realise that not all disabilities are visible. Hopefully this conference will still go ahead once the world is on a more even keel. I do think that as NHS staff, we do have to demonstrate our willingness of acceptance, both within the workplace and with patients. And that's why I formed the Disabled Staff Network in the first place. I wanted a safe space where staff who had health or disability issues covered under the Equality Act 2010 could discuss and learn from other colleagues. I wanted to explain what the Equality Act gave them in terms of protection. Some of them didn't even know they were even covered by an act. I wanted them to understand how they manage their issues at work and beyond, and support each other as a network with information and website links to help them with advice or support they might need. One of the couple of things we've been working on as a network, one of which was, you can call it the health passport, or you can call it the disability passport, but that took me quite a long time, and I worked with our equality team and obviously the board. I'm proud to say that we adopted it as a trust in the middle of last year, and actually people are coming on board with using it, because I kept saying to them, there's no point having it if you're not going to use it. I bring the subject up a lot at DSM meetings, and I also, when I go on Workplace and I talk about it, I did a little video what it is and how it can work for people and why it was important they filled it in, because no point having it and then saying, well, I need a chair and I didn't get one. So if they haven't put it in their passport, they can't then turn around and say, why didn't you help me? Because nobody knew. The other thing that I'm working towards, and it's going to be, this is definitely for the long haul, not the short haul, will be disability leave. And I've explained many times to many people what disability leave is and why it's very different to sickness absence, and why it's important that trusts adopt it. And few trusts have adopted it, and I call them the leaders. But, you know, everything takes time. You know, when people are saying, why can't you do this now? Why can't we have this now? I say, you know, softly, catchy monkey. We will get it, I'm sure. I feel positive. Everything takes time, and so in time we will get it, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, the flexi working scheme, there's 33 options the NHS have got, more awareness of that, I think, because of COVID and because of the results of PTSD and long COVID and difficulties, more and more people are going to look at that flexi working. People have also started working at home, have a better quality of life, and are looking at that flexi working. The last thing I would say was the equality delivery system 2012 is really, you know, often missed. When you talk about the Equality Act, that's fantastic, but the Equality Delivery System 2 is actually designed for the NHS to implement the Equality Act 2010. It's called the EDS 2 because they tried it before and they had to redo it.
Those are two things that I've learned today: 33 options and Equality Delivery System 2, and I definitely will be on to you to give me more information about that, because you've whet my appetite now.
Excellent. Section 3, everybody, bullying and harassment and leave and all that kind of stuff, is a really particularly relevant bit for disability. It's been a fantastic conversation with you. I think we could carry on for another couple of hours, couldn't we, Marce?
Easy. Yeah.
It's lovely to meet somebody as passionate as me. So have you any last words or any last thoughts in terms of what we've had our conversation with Marce Quinn today?
Last thoughts would probably be, join your disabled staff network if you have one. If you haven't got one, then form one, and you can always get in touch with me and I will talk you through how I got about it.
And what we will do then is we'll put your NHS contact details in the transcript that will go along with this podcast. Well, thank you so much, Marce, for your time. I really appreciate it. I'm super excited to have met you, and I hope this is the start of a beautiful relationship.
Thank you, Kay. Really nice to chat to you, and thank you for giving me time to speak.
Take care.
Thank you. Bye.